The Domino Effect. Chapter 1. The Accident. The rain fell heavily that night, turning the road into a dangerous water mirror. Ricardo, a middle-aged man, drove his black sedan with caution. The windshield wiper barely managed to handle the torrent that fell. The radio touched low, a soft melody that contrasted with chaos out there. He returned from a business meeting, the kind of meeting that usually exhausted it, but tonight it seemed different. There was a weight in the air, something he couldn't name. Suddenly the headlights of a truck appeared ahead, very close, and before he could react, there was a deafening crash. The impact was immediate. The car turned on the track, the glasses shattered, and everything was dark. When Ricardo opened his eyes, his head throbbed and the metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. The car was destroyed and he was still alive. He tried to move, but acute pain crossed him. "I need help," he thought as he forced his eyes out the window. In the distance, he saw something unusual. Two men in dark suits were by the truck, talking calmly. They didn't look like drivers. They were on the way fast, as if they knew exactly what to do. The way one of them analyzed the scene, almost as a crime scene inspector, was disconcerting. Ricardo closed his eyes for a moment, fighting against pain and confusion. When he opened them again, the men had disappeared. He forced himself to get out of the car, feeling his muscles protest with each movement. The rain continued to fall, washing the blood from his forehead, and he walked staggers away from the wreckage. What had just happened? It was not just a common accident. He knew that in the back of his being. But what? If you liked the beginning of the story, subscribe and share to find out what is behind the mysterious accident. Chapter 2. Silent Witnesses. Ricardo was found by paramedics about half an hour after the accident, lying on the roadside, tremendous with cold and shock. At the hospital, after some tests, the doctor told him that he had luck. Some broken ribs, a light concussion, but nothing that put his life at risk. However, what disturbed him was not physical pain. It was what I had seen. Those men. Upon leaving the hospital, the first thing he did was call the police and report the accident. The officer across the line seemed disinterested. "Sir, accidents often happen on this road during heavy rains. The truck driver was not found. It seems to run away from the scene. But I saw two men there. They were checking the truck as if they knew what to do. That was not a normal accident. There was a break from the other side." "Let's investigate, sir, but I can't promise we'll find something." Ricardo hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of frustration and despair. If it depended on the police, that would be considered just another accident on the road. But he knew there was something else. He needed to find out what was going on. The next day, still sore, decided to return to the scene of the accident. Dressed in a heavy coat, he drove to the deserted road where his car had been destroyed. The rain had already ceased, but the air was still damp and cold. The place was quiet, as if time had stopped. He began to examine the wreckage still spread across the track. It was then that he saw something shining on the floor, near where the truck had stopped. He crouched down, ignoring rib pain, and took a small metallic device. It looked like a pen drive, but it had recorded symbols that he didn't recognize. Something told me that it was important, that it was not just a garbage left by chance. Suddenly the sound of steps made him raise his head. A man was a few feet from him, watching. He wore a dark suit, similar to the men he saw on the night of the accident. The man said nothing, just gave a cold smile and began to walk towards Ricardo. "Can I help?" Ricardo asked, trying to keep his voice firm. "You have already helped too much," replied the man, enigmatic. "Want to find out who these men are and what Ricardo found out? Subscribe and share to follow this plot of mystery. Chapter 3. Secrets Revealed. Ricardo retreated instinctively, the fingers still squeezing the strange device he had found. The man in a dark suit continued to approach, his cold smile never disappearing. Every step he took seemed to echo on the deserted road, as if time was slowing down, making the environment around even more suffocating. "I don't know who you are, but I want you to move away," said Ricardo, the voice cheating on his attempt to seem confident. The man did not answer. He stopped just a few meters away, tilted his head, and then took something out of the pocket of the suit. Ricardo froze, waiting for the worst. But to his surprise, the man only extended a business card. "You are in the midst of something much bigger than you think, Mr. Ricardo," he said calmly. "There are forces in action that you should not try to face. Deliver what you found and we can forget that this has happened." Ricardo looked at the card without taking it. "Who are you? And what is it? He lifted the pen drive, feeling the weight of the imminent truth to turn in the air. The man sighed as if tired of games. This is not your account. Deliver now and I promise you can go back to your life. But Ricardo already knew this was not possible. Since the accident, something inside it had changed. A simple choice, catching that road, suffering that accident, had triggered a series of events that he still didn't fully understand, but he felt to be part of something much bigger. Something dark. He squeezed the pen drive tightly. I won't give you that. The eyes of the man hardened, and for a brief second, Ricardo felt a wave of pure fear. But then, in a quick movement, the man put the card back in his pocket and stepped back. You're making a big mistake. They won't be as kind as me. And with that, he turned and walked back to the parked car on the roadside. Ricardo stood, the heart beating hard. They? Who were them? Suddenly the pen drive seemed much heavier in his hand. What had he just put in? Back to his apartment, Ricardo connected the pen drive to his laptop. A series of encrypted files appeared on the screen. He was no hacker but knew someone who could help. Lucia, an ancient friend from college, was a cybersecurity expert. She was always the right person when it was technology, and if anyone could decipher it, it was her. Without wasting time, he sent her a message, vaguely explaining what he had found and asking for urgent help. Minutes later, the phone rang. Ricardo, what did you get into? Do you have the idea that you are dealing with? Lucia's voice sounded alarmed, more than he expected. I'm not sure, but I know it's something big. You can decipher? I'm going to try, but I'll need a few hours. And Ricardo, be careful. If these files are what I'm thinking, you may be in serious problems. Ricardo hung up the phone, the stomach tight. There was something in that voice of Lucia that made him restless. And now he was really alone, not knowing what to expect next. Curious to know what Ricardo will find out in the files? Subscribe and share to follow the unfolding of this plot full of twists. Chapter 4. The Hunt. Ricardo's apartment was immersed in the silence of dawn, except for the smooth sound of his notebook as he looked impatiently to the screen. The hours dragged on and Lucia had not yet answered. What would she have found so serious? The restlessness was constant as an invisible presence to the lurking. Then the phone vibrated. Ricardo, I managed to decrypt part of the archives, said Lucia bluntly. His voice was loaded with tension. And you won't believe what I found. They are confidential documents, plans. It seems like a global-scale operation, involving not only corporations but also governments. That's serious. Ricardo's stomach sank. What are you talking about? What do these plans say? They're talking about control. Information control, technology, and even people. It's a gigantic surveillance and manipulation network. I couldn't decipher everything, but from what I've seen, there's something about an operation called Domino. It seems to be the heart of all this. Domino? Ricardo could barely sue what he heard. What is that? I'm not sure yet, but the name repeatedly appears in the documents. And Ricardo, your name is there too. He felt the blood freeze in his veins. What? Your name. They know who you are. And now you are definitely being observed. At that moment, a strong knock sounded at the door of his apartment, interrupting the conversation. Ricardo got up, the heart accelerated. Through the magical eye, he saw 3 men in a suit outside. They were different from the man who approached him before, but his intentions seemed the same and not good. Ricardo, they are knocking on my door too, Lucia whispered, now terrified. They came after us. Get out now, Ricardo whispered back before hanging up the phone. There was no time to think. He needed to escape. Things are warming up. Want to know what will happen next? Subscribe and share so as not to lose the next chapters of this breathtaking plot. Chapter 5. Desperate Escape. Ricardo kept his breath controlled while retreating in silence in the living room. The blows against the door became more intense. He knew he didn't have much time before the tender men decided to invade forcibly. Her heart fired, but her mind tried to maintain clarity. She needed to get out of it immediately. His second-floor apartment was not the easiest for a discreet escape, but he already had a plan. With no time to think of something more elaborate, he ran to the kitchen window. A small balcony in the back gave it to an alley. Better than facing those men, he thought. He opened the window in a hurry, threw a backpack with some essential items for the parapet and squeezed by the narrow opening. As soon as he jumped to the alley, he heard the noise of the apartment door being broken into. They were inside. Ricardo launched himself to the darkness, trying to avoid the noise of his steps on the wet sidewalk. I knew that if they caught it, there would be no return. The truth he was beginning to find out seemed too big, too dangerous. The conspiracy that took place in front of him was like a shadow that stretched over the whole world, and he was now directly in her center. After running a few blocks, he stopped panting in a dark square. He was soaked by the rain that had begun to fall again, mingling with the sweat that was dripped by his forehead. He looked around, making sure he had not been followed, and pulled the phone to call Lucia. He called several times, but there was no answer. He felt a chill at thinking that she could be in trouble or worse. I can't waste time, he told himself. I still had the pen drive in my pocket, and now I knew the content was much more explosive than I could imagine. The word domino echoed in your mind. What did that mean? What kind of operation could this that could involve governments, corporations, and somehow himself? While trying to gather thoughts, a black van doubled the corner at high speed and approached. Ricardo's instinct shouted that something was wrong. He ran behind a tree and crouched down. The vehicle stopped on the street in front of the square, and two men left, scouring the area. "He is around," said one of them, holding his cell phone as if he was receiving instructions from someone. They searched the nearby streets. It must not have gone far. Ricardo remained motionless, trying to calm his breath, fighting the urge to run. They were hunting him, but for now they had not seen him. The men spread and Ricardo saw his chance. Without doing noise, he began to move to the exit of the square, sliding through the shadow of the trees. I needed a refuge, and I needed it fast. Suddenly your phone vibrated silently. A message from Lucia. I got more information. We met at the abandoned season, 15 minutes. Watch out. The abandoned train station was in some streets from there. The perfect place for a discreet encounter. He just needed to get there without being seen. Want to find out what Lucia discovered and how Ricardo will escape? Subscribe and share to accompany the exciting outcome of this suspenseful plot. Chapter 6. Hidden Truths. Ricardo ran through the dark streets, every sound amplified by the adrenaline that roamed his body. The feeling of being hunted would not leave him. The rain continued to fall, its drops beating heavily against the concrete as he approached the train station abandoned. The structure was old, already disabled for years, and its dark air seemed appropriate to the kind of meeting that was about to happen. As he approached, he saw Lucia in a distance, hidden under a partially covered platform. She wore a hood to protect herself from the rain, but her eyes were aware of any movement. When he saw him, he waved briefly and he ran to her. "Are you well?" Ricardo asked, looking quickly around. "For now, yes," said Lucia, visibly tense. "But they are everywhere. We have to act fast. I managed to decipher more files and you will not believe it. Operation Domino is a global conspiracy. They are not just spying governments, corporations, or individuals. They are controlling events, creating crises in one country and profiting from another." Ricardo tried to process the magnitude of it. "And why do I? How is my name involved in that?" Lucia opened the laptop and showed her the screen. "It seems that you, unknowingly, were in the wrong place at the right time. Your company, the projects you were working on, were connected to something bigger. You were classified as a risk because your access to certain information could have revealed everything. The accident you suffered, it was not an accident." Ricardo felt a wave of anger and desperation to take care of him. "So they go after anyone who represents a threat?" "Yes," said Lucia. "And now we both are targets. But there is more. Domino is about to fall. From what I saw, they are about to launch a great operation. A global financial crisis manufactured. They will destroy whole economies and benefit from it." Before Ricardo could answer, a noise echoed through the station. The sound of heavy steps, stuffy by the rain. They were surrounded. Lucia looked at him, wide eyes. "It's time to make a choice, Ricardo. We ran now and live to fight another day, or we try to expose it all and risk our lives." He felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. "But I knew I couldn't go back anymore. The truth was too big, the conspiracy too wide. It was time to act." Are you enjoying the story? Subscribe and share so as not to lose the electrifying outcome of this suspenseful plot. Chapter 7. The Last Movement. Ricardo squeezed the pen drive in his pocket and looked at Lucia, his heart beating fast. "If we stand still, they will meet and we will not have another chance. We need to expose everything now." Lucia nodded, already moving frantically on the laptop. I will access a safe server. If we can send these files to the right people, maybe there is still a chance to overthrow this entire operation. But before she could continue, the steps got closer, and the shadows of the dark-suiting men came from the entrance to the abandoned season. Ricardo and Lucia exchanged glances. They knew they had a few minutes, maybe seconds. Lucia, we can send it later. Now we have to leave here, Ricardo said, feeling the desperation to take care. He took her arm and began to pull her to a side outlet. But Lucia resisted. No. If we don't send it now, they will erase any trail and everything will be lost. She shouted, the frantic fingers on the keyboard. She was determined to do that even though she knew they were surrounded. Ricardo looked back. The men approached, weapons in hand. Every second looked shorter, like an invisible countdown. But then in the corner of the screen he saw a small icon flashing, full shipping. We achieved, Lucia whispered, her wide eyes with relief. The documents are out. Now everyone will know. But the relief was short-lived. The sound of steps and voices echoed everywhere, getting closer. There were no easy exits. They were trapped. This way. Ricardo pointed to a rusty staircase that led to the top of an old train platform. We can escape the tracks. The two ran to the stairs, rushed as the men in suit followed them. Upon reaching the top, the view of the old tracks stretched before them, but there was nowhere to go beyond jumping or following the darkness of the tunnels. Lucia, we have to jump, Ricardo said, with his eyes fixed at the time they would have to face. But before they could move, one of the men appeared at the top of the stairs, pointing a gun directly to them. It's over, he said coldly. Deliver the device now or you won't leave here. Ricardo looked at Lucia. Pen drive is still safe in his hand. Even with files already sent, he knew that small device contained additional evidence that could overthrow the entire operation. He stepped forward. You have lost. We have already sent everything. There is no more what you can do. The man did not hesitate. It may be, but you won't live to see what will happen next. At that moment, sirens' sound cut the night air. Ricardo and Lucia exchanged a surprised look, and the man in a suit frowned. Blue and red lights began to blink on the horizon. The police. Someone had found them first. The men of suit did not hesitate. They began to withdraw, fast and quiet as ghosts, disappearing through the darkness of the tunnels. But the leader of men stopped for a moment, staring at Ricardo. This is not over yet. Ricardo felt the weight of the words. He knew that even with the documents exposed, the fight was far from over. But for now they had won a battle. Lucia sighed to see the police lights approaching. We got it, but we're far from safe. Ricardo nodded. The world now knew of Operation Domino, but that did not mean that the forces behind it would simply disappear. They were powerful, influential, and they would do everything to keep control. The two looked at each other, exhausted but determined. The domino effect began, Ricardo said, looking at the city beyond the tracks. Now we just need to keep fighting to overthrow the rest. They didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. Nothing more would be like before. The end. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, like and comment on the story.